Hello viewers, you're welcome to your show, my show, our show, the Digging Deep Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today marks the last day of our Heart Awareness campaign for 2014, and we are so privileged to have a man who is well rooted in regards to cardiovascular diseases. He's a professor, an educationist, and he's also the chairman of Blood Pressure UK, Professor Graham MacGregor. Welcome, sir.
Hi, good to see you.
Thank you. Like I mentioned, you coming and we are rounding up. We've been having some few people coming and giving tips in regards to high blood pressure among the Afro-Caribbean, black people.
Yeah, sure.
What can you say about the Afro-Caribbean?
Well, I'm sure as you're aware, high blood pressure is much more frequent in black people, whether they come from Africa or the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be reasons behind that, because they're more sensitive to salt. And also they tend generally to have a very high salt intake, particularly from the Caribbean, where they add a lot of salt to foods. They use spices with salt in. So that combination of being more sensitive to salt, eating a lot of salt, means they're much more likely to develop high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is the biggest cause of strokes, heart attacks, heart failure, and kidney disease. Now, what we see particularly in blacks, because generally they don't eat a lot of fat and they don't smoke, is they're less likely to get the narrowing of the arteries, the so-called atheroma, but they get all the problems of blood pressure. So strokes are the biggest cause of death in blacks. Then heart failure is very common because of the very high blood pressure. When the heart is having to pump against a much higher pressure, it tends to fail because it can't cope with the high blood pressure. And then you get breathlessness because you get fluid in the lungs, and you get edema, and it's not a funny thing to develop. And then, of course, renal disease requiring dialysis is much more common in blacks, and often that's directly due to high blood pressure.
And the question would be, how do we wean them from salt, since it's something which probably they might have been having for quite a long time now?
Well, first of all, you need to know what your blood pressure is, because obviously there's some people who do have normal blood pressure. Not everyone's got high blood pressure. So first thing, anyone who's black should know what their blood pressure is, and if they don't, they're crazy.
Regardless of age,
okay, but I think from the age of 20 onwards. This applies to the whole population, but particularly to blacks. I think blacks who don't know what their blood pressure are bonkers, right? Absolutely bonkers. Because I know, and most of your viewers will know, that in their family they've had people who've had strokes at quite a young age. Now those strokes are totally preventable by doing the right things. It doesn't matter how late you pick the blood pressure up, you can get it down and reduce the number of people dying from stroke. So every time someone dies of a stroke, particularly at a younger age, it's a tragedy which could have been prevented, right? Now, coming back to your original question of what should we do about salt? Well, obviously it depends on what your blood pressure level is. If it's okay, but you want to get it back, then that's, you do it slowly. If your blood pressure's raised, my view is to take the radical approach, right? I'll tell you what it is, and I tell this to all my black patients. You're going to go home tonight, you're going to take all the salt, all the stock cubes, all the soy sauce, all the seasoning, and into the dustbin, right? The whole bloody lot into the dustbin, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to have a cultural shock, because the food will taste very bland, but you can use chili, spices without salt, herbs, put a bit of wine or beer or something in, everything, vinegar. You can have fantastic, with onions, garlic, ginger, fantastic food. Now initially, because you've been having this huge amounts of salt in it, it will taste funny. But I can tell you from experience of all the patients who had a large number at St George's who were black, most of them, not all of them, would come back, say, you're absolutely right, after 4 weeks, takes 4 weeks for the salt taste receptors, come back and say, the food's fantastic, I much prefer it, and I put my whole family on it now. And so it is possible to do it. I'm aware there are a lot of blacks who, we can't throw the salt away and all this rubbish. You can, and it's the best single thing you can do to live a long and happy life. I can tell you.
And there's this type of research which also says stress contributes to high blood pressure. How much true is that?
No, look, if somebody came into a machine gun in this studio, our blood pressures would go off the roof, right? But that doesn't mean to say that gives you sustained blood pressure in the long term. What we're talking about is blood pressure that's raised forever. Do you see? Whereas stress causes transient increases in blood pressure, but there's no evidence at the moment that it causes a long chronic increase in blood pressure that salt and some other things in the diet do. So, and studies of stress reduction can show that you can learn to lower your blood pressure when you do this relaxation, but your blood pressure's not lowered when you're not relaxing. Well, I mean, one of the best things to do, if you really want to lower blood pressure, you know what the best thing to do? Spend the rest of your life asleep. Right? And who wants to spend the rest of their life asleep? Well, okay, but I'm telling you, if you want to lower your blood pressure by stress reduction, go to sleep, because as you know, when you go to sleep, your blood pressure goes right down. Now, that's not a way we get treated. And similarly with stress reduction, I mean, people get worked up when it's being measured too, and we have to allow for that. But if you can learn not to get worked up, then it will be lower. But in fact, that's just a false alarm reaction. You see what I mean? It's not what your blood pressure is chronically over the next 20 years.
And Professor, we're giving a bonus to those who smoke. Among the black community, we know that we are not probably at the higher rank.
No, that's one good thing. Particularly women don't smoke, but it's true, blacks don't smoke nearly as much. I mean, they may be, I don't know about younger teenagers and now what the rates are there, but certainly that's one good thing, because smoking, it not only causes heart disease, it also causes cancer, you know. So again, anyone who smokes is bonkers. And also the other thing is it makes you impotent, because it furs up, you see, you get the atheroma, the narrowing of the arteries, and if the vital artery supplying a vital bit of your anatomy gets furred up, you can't get an erection. And, you know, so that's an important thing to do. That smoking causes impotence. Not only kills you, but it makes you impotent.
Thank you very much. You mentioned an issue of if you have had a relative who probably was diagnosed high blood pressure, you are likely, you have high chances of having it.
Yeah.
So could the issue of salt be included in this, or it has now just become a hereditary disease without whether you take salt or you don't take salt? It's just within.
Well, there's obviously an inherited factor in blood pressure. It runs in families, but I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. So you've got the genes you have. You can't change the genes, and the thing to do is to change the environment. Now, obviously, diet's important, but when blood pressure's high, they're very good tablets to lower it, and we mustn't forget that you want to know what your blood pressure is, and if it's above a certain level, there are very good studies showing huge benefits of taking blood pressure drugs to lower the blood pressure and preventing the strokes, heart attacks, heart failure and kidney disease. So, you know, it's not all just diet, but it's a very important element of it. But we must remember they're very good drugs, and these drugs now have very few side effects. You can take, I mean, I'm on blood pressure drugs, I feel quite normal, and I cut my salt intake. Now, everyone else can do that. There's nothing to be worried about. A lot of people get worried about blood pressure, you know. Oh, it's terrible, you know, these tablets. And most of the tablets cause no effects whatsoever.
So, Professor, does it mean if I want our viewers to understand that if you are diagnosed high blood pressure, is there any hope for you?
Well, of course there is. I mean, you know, just because you've got high blood pressure doesn't mean you're going to die tomorrow. We're talking about long-term risks. And, you know, I would have said 40, maybe 50% of adult blacks have high blood pressure in the UK. So you're talking about at least a third, definitely, and maybe half. So it's not exactly uncommon. I mean, you know, it's not as though you're one in 100, you're 1 in 2. Yeah. I can tell you, if there's a black man walking towards me in the street, there's a 50% chance that he's got high blood pressure. So that's the thing to remember. So get it measured. You know, get it measured. You don't know what it is until it's measured, and don't be scared of having it measured, because it's the best single thing you can do, because this is raised. You can treat it with a dart, we're talking about, also treat it with tablets, prevent yourself getting a stroke. If you don't have it measured, you won't know what it is. Next thing is, boom, you've had a stroke. And you survive, which is the worst possible thing, half paralysed for the rest of your life, and you can't talk, depending on which side of the brain it is. Do you really want to do that? What's the point of taking the risk of having that stroke? Obviously, it's up to individuals, but if your blood pressure is raised above 140/90, that's the top lower pressure, then you probably need to be on treatment. I mean, the tablets, so, we've got two weapons really. One is the dart for the whole population, because if everyone restricted their salt intake from the day they were born, we wouldn't have so many people with high blood pressure, right? Then at the other end, we've got people who have developed high blood pressure, partly because they haven't done anything about their diet, but we can do a lot for them as well. So, I mean, we're not just talking about diet, we're talking about very effective drugs which have very few side effects, and when we use them in combination, they're very effective. And one of the things I say to my patients, you go along to the doctor, it gives you a tablet, right? You come back, it's not working too well. So we then add in another one, and that doesn't work too well, the combination. So we then add in another one. And then the patient says, God almighty, I'm really, but in fact, that's a very good thing. Shall I tell you why?
Why?
Well, because you've got a very good body that opposes the action of the drug. You see, one of the things that blood pressure, when you try and lower the blood pressure in anybody, the body doesn't like it, right? And this, so it tries to put the blood pressure up again, right? So we hit it with one mechanism, right, with a drug that cuts out that. Then you react, but the tablets don't work. So we then add in another one, right? And it still doesn't work. So you've got an incredible body at resisting all these drugs. You then add in the third one, and that gets it. So you go down to the pub or whatever, and you can say, what an incredible bloke you are. You need 3 tablets to control your blood pressure. Why only need 1?
Now that we have reduced sugar and we have reduced salt, is there any reason for us to keep on exercising?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are other things to do with the diet. One is to eat more potassium, which has the opposite effects of salt. And that's done by eating more fruit and vegetables. So, very good idea to eat more fruit and vegetables. Obviously, don't be overweight, and reducing calorie intake by reducing sugar and fat intake, particularly saturated fat, because that lowers cholesterol. And doing more exercise is important, and keeping fit, because that's been shown to lower blood pressure, and not drinking alcohol excessively. That certainly puts up blood pressure. But I want to stress again that by far the most important thing is getting the salt intake down, because many black patients will find that if they restrict their salt, that will get their blood pressure down without doing anything else. If they need tablets, the tablets are much more effective if they reduce their salt intake. But nevertheless, fruit and vegetables, cutting the calorie intake, not being overweight, doing exercise, very beneficial as well.
So cholesterol as well is...
Yeah, but cholesterol's not such a big problem in many blacks, but I think it's becoming one because they are eating more fat. You see, originally their diet didn't contain as much fat as ours did, but now they're eating, particularly children, all these takeaway processed foods that are full of animal fat, full of palm oil, and I think we're going to see an increasing rate of heart attacks in blacks. And indeed, I think we're already seeing that. So we would emphasise that you want to cut the fat out, particularly animal fat and palm oil, and switch to rapeseed oil, canola oil, or olive oil. That's quite expensive. And as a second best, use polyunsaturated fats, which are the soya, corn oil, those types of things. Don't use palm oil or coconut oil. They're the worst fats that are known. And I don't know, I think many Afro-Caribbeans may have a lot of those types. You see, they're natural oils, and they're the worst ones at putting up your cholesterol.
And Professor, I know research says more than 200 people die every week due to high blood pressure. On the other hand as well, we are seeing that there are young people who are being diagnosed, which was kind of a rare thing could it be the issue of salt as well to young people?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, many younger blacks get high blood pressure, particularly males, at quite an early age, and they need to be sought out and you know, go on the right diet and if necessary, take treatment. And one of the things I'd stress about this diet is it is fantastic when you get on it. Once you get used to it, you'll much prefer it because you can have lots of vegetables, fruit, some meat, fresh fish, seafood if you want, and it's a fantastic diet because not only do you feel much better because you lose fluid from you, particularly females feel much better, but it gives you more energy. I mean, this is a surprising thing I found with all our patients, that when they came back, they say, yeah, I mean, the blood pressure's down, but I actually feel much better. And that's the thing about not eating all this salt, fat. It makes you feel, you know, when you go out and have big fat McDonald's hamburger and Coca-Cola and chips, I mean, all right, transient, okay, but about an hour later, I just, you know.
What do we do with processed food?
Well, obviously processed food has a lot of salt stuffed in it, and we have managed, we've had a public health policy where the food industry is slowly reducing the amount of salt. Most of the products you buy in the supermarket come down by about 30% the amount of salt they add, but even so, they're very high in salt. And we're just about to release a press release on pizzas where, you know, I don't want to reveal all the details, but the point is that some pizzas have, I think, 16 grams of salt in it.
And what's the normal one?
5 is what you're meant to eat.
For the whole day?
Yeah, the whole day. And in their pizza, there's 3 times. Some, it's not all of them, it's 1 or 2 examples. So you can see how they stuff all this salt in, and it's unnecessary, it can be reduced. But of course, that's not really the issue. The issue for black people is they should really be reducing their own salt intake, as we discussed before, but also making their diet very healthy, because there is a reduction in life expectancy in blacks compared to Asians, who also get high blood pressure more frequently, get diabetes, just like blacks do. But in fact, it actually results in a reduced life expectancy in black people, and it's important that people are much more aware of it. So, I mean, I fully support your campaign, because the more we can get awareness out there, the better, and the more people can take responsibility for their own lives and for their own diet, and realise that there are certain aspects of the diet that are not good, and we can change those and actually have a very good diet. You know, that's the point. That if you change, okay, it's difficult when you change, but once you get used to it, you'll much prefer the food that you're on now, with less salt, more fruit and vegetables, less fat, plenty of fish, a bit of meat, only the lean meat and so on, and you can have rice, pasta, cereals. Of course, bread's got a lot of salt in, so you've got to be careful there, particularly for bread. Yeah, that's the biggest source of salt in the diet, because we eat a lot of it, and it's got the same amount of salt in as a packet of crisps. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you see the crisps have the salt on the outside, so they immediately dissolve and give you a very strong salty flavour. Whereas the bread, the salt is mixed up, so you have to chew it for a long time, and most people have swallowed it. So you don't, you know, okay, it tastes, if you remove the salt from bread, you can taste that, but people don't realise how much salt is in it. So one good move for people to do, if they've got high blood pressure, where we really want them to cut their salt intake as far as they possibly can, is to actually make their own bread without salt, which you can do easily, and then you add ingredients, you add nuts, or if you want to have onions, garlic, or, you know, put whole grains in. So you make fantastic bread, slice it, as soon as it's baked, put it in the deep freeze, then take it out, put it in a toaster, and it's fantastic, just like it's come out of the oven. So that's another little tip. For people, you know, black people who've got high blood pressure, I would really advise them, if they're eating bread, which a lot of them do, you know, sandwiches at lunchtime, bread in the evening, is why not think about making your own bread without salt, flavouring it with other ingredients, and that immediately reduces your salt intake by about 30%.
Professor, we have heard some people from within the community who are sending mails to say, yes, I've been diagnosed high blood pressure and
Yeah.
medication, but it's not working well with me.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the type of drugs that need to be used in black people are different, and I think a lot of doctors don't realise that. It's very difficult to be specific, but in general, black people respond better to a class of drugs called the calcium antagonists or diuretics, whereas younger Caucasians and Asians as well tend to respond better to drugs that block the renin system, the so-called angiotensin receptor blockers or ACE inhibitors. I mean, I don't want to go into it in great detail, but the point is, once we combine the drugs together, whatever ethnic group you come from, they become very effective. So our view is that we need to get far more people on combinations of drugs to get effective control. And it's very rare to see black people, even we used to have a very large number referred to as difficult to control blood pressure, put them on all 3 tablets at the right dose, and blood pressure is magically controlled. It's very rare to find people we couldn't control without them feeling quite well. Now, the corollary of that is they've got to take 3 tablets. But I told this thing about how actually, if you take 3 tablets, you're a bloody strong guy, and it's a good thing. Because you do need to take 3 tablets. And the good thing about the 3 tablets is you tend to get less side effects when you combine them together, and people feel better on them. So there are a lot of pluses to actually taking a combination tablet, even in a relatively low dose, because it'd be very effective, because you're hitting these different mechanisms. Do you see what I mean? You don't want to push the dose of drug too high, because then you get side effects. So what we would often do is give a modest dose of the drug, add in the other one, add in another one. We've got all 3 drugs at modest doses, so you get fewer side effects with the patient feeling quite well, rather than loading them up with one drug at a very high dose, and they're going around. And this, of course, used to apply to the old drugs, because the old drugs, beta blockers and big doses of diuretics and various drugs we used to use, did cause a lot of side effects. The modern drugs tend not to, but they can upset people. I mean, another thing just to remember for blacks is the ACE inhibitors, drugs like lisinopril and enalapril, are much more likely to cause a very rare thing called angioedema, where they get sudden swelling of the lips, and they can get swelling of the larynx, and that's really dangerous. So if any of your viewers there have ever had that, they need to go to their doctor and tell them that, because they shouldn't be on that tablet. There's another tablet you can substitute which doesn't cause this swelling. The other thing is that the ACE inhibitors cause a cough, and many people are going like this all the time. They don't realise that it's due to the ACE inhibitors, so that's another important point. But apart from that, these drugs are remarkably free of side effects. Now, the calcium antagonists we use, amlodipine, very good drug, very long-acting, that can cause ankle swelling. And it's important that women are aware of that, because if you're getting ankle swelling and you're on amlodipine, that's due to the drug. It doesn't do you any harm, but it causes them a lot of anxiety. Swollen ankles, women don't particularly like to have that, and they need to reduce the dose or change to another tablet. So 3 things: 1, angioedema, swelling, sudden swelling of the lips or face, go and see the doctor. Cough, go and see the doctor. Swelling of the ankles, go and see the doctor.